Welcome, everyone. I'm Jonathan Reckford, CEO of Habitat for Humanity International. I'm excited to join you today to discuss the work Habitat is doing in the U.S. and around the world to develop climate-resilient housing strategies. Thanks to each of you for taking the time to be part of this call. We're pleased to present the first of what I hope will be many of these Cornerstone Conversations virtual events. This is an opportunity for you, some of our most dedicated donors, to hear from leaders throughout the Habitat network about the work you so generously support. Thank you for your continued commitment to Habitat's mission to build homes, communities, and hope, including in disaster-prone areas. Extreme heat and climate change are leading to more frequent and more extreme climate disasters, including severe storms, tropical cyclones, droughts, hurricanes, and other natural disasters. Last year, in 2024, there were 27 weather and climate disaster events in the U.S., including Hurricanes Helene and Milton, which devastated the Southeast, and severe storms and tornadoes throughout the Central and Midwest regions. Additionally, the wildfires in Southern California earlier this year destroyed over 16,000 homes, commercial properties, and other structures, displaced nearly 200,000 residents, and created losses between $76 and $131 billion. Globally, hurricanes, typhoons, landslides, and earthquakes ravaged South America, Taiwan, Ethiopia, the Philippines, and many other countries, causing widespread damage, displacement, and loss of life. Habitat is responding to these disasters in a number of ways. Throughout the Habitat network, we are focusing on housing disaster resilience and recovery, including housing resilience before and after a disaster, which includes climate change resilience. Capacity building, by working to strengthen project implementation capacity for national organizations and U.S. affiliates in disaster-prone areas to enable robust recovery and reconstruction. And targeted engagement and influence, where we will engage through partnerships, preposition, and influence in the disaster response sector for early recovery and reconstruction. Habitat is also addressing the looming impact climate change has on the U.S. housing and insurance markets. Changes in the home insurance market are a growing threat to Habitat's ability to serve our communities. Insurance premiums are rising rapidly, and insurers are leaving states prone to natural disasters like Louisiana and Florida. Homeowners are reporting increases of $500 to $800 a month on mortgages that before Hurricane Ida were all $500 to $700. Also, many are reporting being dropped by their carriers and scrambling to find coverage. Affiliates across the U.S. are working to address this massive challenge. New Orleans, Louisiana Habitat is involved in the National Coalition for Sustainable Flood Insurance. The coalition has been working to ensure transparency, affordability, and stability within the new flood insurance framework called Risk Rating 2.0. While Risk Rating 2.0 promises more granularity and accuracy than the previous system, it has led to frustration due to lack of information about how rates are determined, and alarm due to premiums rising as much as 18% a year. We've also increased our efforts in advocacy, supporting policies that reduce vulnerabilities and help people adapt to climate-related hazards and threats. Habitat is gaining traction throughout the U.S., where affiliates are partnering with the insurance industry, lawmakers, and government at all levels, housing providers, and other organizations. New Orleans Habitat and East St. Tammany Habitat led efforts with other Louisiana affiliates to help Louisianians combat issues with weather-related damages and costs. They built a coalition of board members, business and community partners, and other supporters that successfully advocated for $30 million in grant funding for the Louisiana Fortify Homes program. The program will help homeowners fund installations of high wind-resistant roofs to fortified standards to prevent disaster-related damage and preserve local affordable homes. There continues to be a lot of innovative and responsive work throughout the Habitat Network to address climate resiliency and strengthen housing to ensure homeowners can stay in their homes. Today, we will hear from two Habitat leaders about the challenges they're facing from climate disasters in their region and the work they're doing to strengthen communities and build resilient housing. I'm excited to introduce our panelists. Allison Hay has been the Executive Director of Houston Habitat for Humanity since 2013. Since its founding, Houston Habitat has built over 1,300 homes for hardworking, low-income Houstonians. In 2024, Houston Habitat celebrated the grand opening of Robbins Landing, Houston's first affordable master plan community with 468 single-family homes that welcomes both inaugural and future homeowners. Thank you, Allison, for joining us today. Hema Stratico is the Regional Director for the Terwilliger Center for Innovation and Shelter, or TCIS, at Habitat for Humanity International. She's been with Habitat since 2014. In her role, Hema leads program design and implementation geared towards eradicating poverty housing with initiatives that highlight sustainable housing solutions through innovative strategies and robust partnerships. Hema works in Latin America and is joining us today from Mexico. Hema, thank you for joining us. I'd like to start with Hema and the work TCIS is doing in Peru to address climate resiliency and housing in response to earthquakes. Hema, can you start by sharing the most significant challenges faced by communities in Peru regarding housing vulnerability to earthquakes or a climate event that could affect families?
Oh, thank you so much for the question. Such a pleasure to be here with you today. In Peru, communities faced critical challenges regarding housing vulnerability to earthquake and climate events. And these challenges, of course, are deeply tied to informality and progressive nature of how homes are being built. First, we need to understand that 7 out of 10 homes are built in urban areas, and especially in metropolitan Lima, are built without permits, without technical supervision, using uncertified materials, and without complying with the seismic resistance standard. And this is a very serious thing because as California and the flow for earthquakes, Peru is sitting on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where seismic risk is constant. And if an event happens in metropolitan Lima, it is said that 500,000 homes are estimated to be at high risk of collapse in an event of an earthquake. Additionally, these homes are not built in a single construction phase. They are a product of a progressive process that can take decades, can take 3 decades, for example. And at each stage depends on irregular family incomes, informal recommendations of local foremen, materials that are available in the neighborhood hardware stores that maybe are not of top quality. And on top of these, location plays a very, very important thing. As you have seen in some of the pictures, the land that is affordable for these homes to be located on are hillsides, and these are not secure ways of building a home. And as a result, rains, mudslides, floods, this is what the type of risk that families are exposed with poor infrastructure and little capacity to respond. And finally, there are structural barriers. Families lack land titles or property titles, and these, of course, limit access both to credit and government subsidies for home improvement that could build or increase their knowledge for safe and sustainable construction practices.
It's a really important point. Habitat has a remarkable record of the homes that we built being really resilient. But as you look, so often, as you make the point, low-income families live in the most vulnerable locations on land that's less safe and in structures that are less safe. And a lot of our work through the Terwilliger Center has been trying to increase resilience for the market beyond the houses that Habitat is directly building. Can you talk about how earthquakes or climate events impact regions of Peru differently than in other regions? And how does this guide our strategy for housing resiliency?
Definitely. We have 80% of the population in Peru living in urban settings. 30% of that total are located in metropolitan Lima. So, and given that there is a specific ring of fire, of course, it exposes families much more in a case of an earthquake or an event. The other very good statistic is that nearly 68% of those homes are built without permits or technical supervision. Therefore, these, in an event of a seismic event, that could be catastrophic. And then you have the other geography in Peru that is near the Amazonian region. And of course, this is unregulated zones, precarious materials are the main things that happens. And these homes cannot withstand floods or heavy rains. And of course, in a case of an event, families do not have financial means to make sustainable improvements of their homes.
For all of our listeners to be aware of is that in the global south, the overwhelming majority of low-income families build incrementally. They can't afford or have access to a full mortgage or a home house loan. And so that lack of information or support to be able to make structurally sound improvements is a huge issue. Hema, can you continue to talk about the work TCIS is doing in Peru to address climate resiliency in housing?
Definitely. Thank you so much for the question. And as have you seen, the pictures, when I came back first to Peru, I saw these pictures and I was there and I was looking at where do we start? How do we start the work? And the first thing is understanding that we cannot do this work alone. At the Terwilliger Center and at the core of our work is the fact that we are market facilitators. We try to work with the best partners that are innovative enough and brave enough to go by simply building better, but we engage with partners that share our goals, are open to innovating within the sector, because the context is so challenging that current solutions will not diminish or improve housing conditions for millions of people, which is what we are after. So we start, and we have this program for working with construction, middle and small construction companies. And we try to work with them to first have a deep understanding of how families build progressively, how in a single phase or in a single plot of land, a family will build 3 types of homes in 30 years. And that means that construction companies should pay services that are differentiated according to where that home is in their journey of how that family has made decisions to build it. The other key component is financing. And many families will improve their homes, but often lack access to suitable financial products that understand that they will build progressively or in phases. So here we co-design these construction services offered by construction companies to diminish the risk, like also access finance. Paired with that then it can also reach by having some educational content of why we need to build back better and invest better so that those homes can withstand climate or become more climate resilient. And along these lines, we also work with partners that are interested on deploying awareness campaigns or want to talk about quality or safety, for example, electrical installations. 13,000 homes that there reported burns and how do you say, the houses like these are being burnt every year, 13,000 homes, because they don't have secure electrical installations. So it's, it's understanding how there are actors on the ground that can understand those realities. And I'm going to go finally, and not less important, we need a data, a proper use of data, of how we understand how families build home this way, because by only understanding how they are built, we can interact and make it better with all the market actors that are playing at that space, and how building climate resilience is not just about concrete, it's about strengthening capacities, improving markets, expanding financial access, and above all, keeping the families at the center of their housing journey.
Oh, there's so much to unpack there, and we probably need a whole different webinar talking about what market development means, which is a whole piece. But some of the things you talked about, Hem, I think are so critical that when you think about trying to make the market actually work for the very large low-income populations across the global South, in middle and low-income contexts. First, so many families don't have the right to stay on their land, so property rights are a huge issue. Access to finance, and one of our biggest pillars has been being a pioneer in housing microfinance and giving access to those home improvement loans. But even if you could stay and get a loan, how do you have the information to build well? And that's where some really innovative work has been happening to make sure that families can get value for their money as they try to do those improvements. And Emma, can you talk about some of the techniques, specific things you've done working with partners to build climate resilient housing, and where you see the best opportunities for innovation of some of the things we're exploring in Peru?
Yes, thank you very much. And I have to stress that we cannot do this work in isolation. For us, we use open innovation settings. We do pilot testing, that is 3 months. We use prototyping. So we don't come in by understanding and testing a solution in one community and that's it. We test it for 3 months. And then we leverage current partners, leverage our learnings, and go back to the same solution, but with a different twist. And this allows communities, private sector governments, but also academia and researchers, we have found, especially for climate change and this type of work, understanding the root causes of vulnerability, places, academic institutions, and research centers at the core of whatever it is we are trying to rebuild or rethink, how to support climate resilience and sustainable building for the low-income sector. So we, and I think there is a picture where we do the prototyping, we go with different solutions. As I said, there you go, the slide. We don't come with a single solutions. For example, in Peru, there is full building options with construction companies, but there are also home improvements that are like non-structural, but also structural home improvements. And we try to work with using technologies. There are many startups that are working in there with Contech or PropTech that use technologies. So we try to limit the fragmentation between supply and demand so that they meet in the market, and scalability, which is where we are right now, and everything what we're doing in Peru right now is trying to become scalable. Those vehicles continue to be access to finance or financing of these options. But as I said before, the key, I think, is having actors diminish the risk of innovating for the sector, using data, and at the same time, pilots that go for 3 to 6 months, we iterate, we learn, we talk to each other, and we understand how, and we put the family at the center of the innovation. And that ensures that each project not only better prepares families for climate risk, but also activates local capacities and generates systemic impact at the end of the day.
So, as Habitat works on housing projects in the region and globally, talk a little about how they integrate, considering both adaptation and resilience into the design of those projects.
It will depend. For example, currently, right now in Peru, we are testing electrical installations, as I said. We're iterating now a second phase of 3 packages that goes for different housing typologies, like the house that is made out of wood, the house that has probably a store inside that needs more amperes in that electricity. But we are partnering there with 4 market actors, one that organizes demand through housing solutions with affordable sanitary dry toilets, which is very, very interesting. And we're pairing there with a microfinance institution that is a community bank. And we partner with the Alliance of Local National Electrical Distributors with local hardware stores. We're learning so much. We're learning, and the thing is that if we learn in a small community, this community reaches 1,500 families, then we can scale nationwide if this becomes a sustainable business model for the electrical distributor networks. And electrical distributor networks are so interesting to see because before they were going against Chinese products and certified in the countries and doing all this lobbying. And now, through working with us, they are competing through a business model to take those quality materials directly to families. So that in local hardware stores, these are good quality products moving forward. But we're not staying there. We have the same process for construction companies building roof, and building floors, and building non-structural humidity solutions and reinforcements, and working with local and small and medium construction companies, which I think are our best allies in this type of context where informality and the way people build, as I said before, 7 out of 10 homes are going to be produced like this and are being produced like this as we move forward. So, yes, that's unpacking a lot.
It is a lot, and it's some of the most exciting scaling work, because the things you're talking about mean that not only are we directly helping individual families through Habitat's direct work, but now you're talking about systems change work that can impact the entire market, and that allows us to move from thousands to millions of people impacted. And I've just seen such good examples around the world over the time. And I remember in Bangladesh, from an adaptation perspective, the question there in southern Bangladesh isn't if it will flood, it's when it floods. So we actually designing the community training so there's an action plan and everyone knows what to do to be safe, and that there's a safe community place to go when the waters rise, and then actually designing the houses so the water can come in and go back out again, because you know flooding is going to happen. So how do you create resilient families and communities in that context? In a similar way, in places like Haiti, you have both earthquake and hurricane risk, which is a scary combination. And ironically there, what we saw after the earthquake was people, to avoid hurricanes, wanted cement roofs, but then in earthquakes, that turned out to be a tragically dangerous thing to do. And what we showed and demonstrated is actually you could do lightweight roofs that could still be hurricane resistant if they were strapped properly. And when Hurricane Sandy, before it came to the U.S., the Superstorm Sandy came through, we had built 350 homes for families who lost their homes in the earthquake. And those turned out to be the safest places in the whole area when the hurricane came, even though they were very simple homes. They were built properly and to resilient standards. We are going to switch from the world back to the U.S. Allison, I'm so glad to have you with us, and we want to bring we have so many questions for you. Can you share a little bit of the work your team is doing in Houston, where you've sadly experienced too many disasters, to address climate resiliency there, particularly the flooding, the hurricanes, and extreme heat, given your location in the Gulf Coast. We've seen a significant increase in incidents over the past 10 years, with 8 federally declared disasters since 2015. So how are you managing all that?
Thank you. This is a very fascinating topic, and it really relates to everyone in the world. In Houston, we have a lot of different types of disasters. We like to think of them as water coming down, water coming up, winds blowing across, either hurricanes, and then last year our first derecho. And then usually in our climate, it's very, very hot. So we have a disaster component for the heat. And then just to top it off, in 2021 and 2023, we had such severe cold weather, we lost our power. And we had a significant amount of homes of families that don't have a lot of insulation. The families the most vulnerable, their pipes froze and broke, and then ruined their homes that way. And Hurricane Harvey, that hurricane specifically dumped an estimated 24.5 trillion gallons of rain in Texas and Louisiana. And that rain came in 5 days, so that the water rose up and our flood level was at 55 inches. Now, we are close to bayous, but the bayous just can't absorb that type of rate of rain and how fast. It meant that a lot of the homes that we saw that were very close to us, the water rose very quickly, up to 4 feet in most of the homes, areas that had never flooded before. We had started in 2015 with a Memorial Day flood, and we had 6 Florida flood. We had 6 flooding events before Hurricane Harvey. So if you can remember, the most vulnerable families, as they try to recover, they would have another event. We pay a lot of attention to that in the Gulf Coast. Derechos are quite interesting because we are used to hurricane winds. The derecho wind was something that's been experienced in other part of the country, but it's our first. What I was so proud of is that because of our innovations in building materials, the fortified roof, none of our Habitat homes experienced any loss of roofs. But the heat, for all of us, especially even in where Hema is, the heat factor has become a health issue and a disaster in its own way, because it leaves people more susceptible to health issues, and it's harder to recover when you are exhausted all the time. So that's kind of the disaster profile for us. We haven't had a wildfire yet or locusts, but everything else we've got covered.
Well, we will hope for no locusts. And your team has done some heroic work, both in preparation, but certainly in response and recovery. Can you talk a little bit about what that response has looked like?
Yes. So just like our affiliates in the greater Gulf Coast, we look at disaster and how it comes in, whatever it is. Each one of them is different, but there's 3 primary phases of disasters and their recovery. The first is life-saving, right? We all know that when we're saving people from rooftops, we're getting them to a temporary shelter. That is really the areas where all community comes together because we're trying to save lives. That usually lasts in any kind of disaster we've seen between 3 to 5 days. So you have a disaster, takes about 3 to 5 days for you to be able to get people safe and secure. The next phase of it, of course, is another part of disaster, which is this cleanup. This is all hands on deck. You'll see many churches and volunteers out there mucking and gutting. We get a lot of volunteers that are out there ready to go in your city, in your community. All of us have experienced that. And that usually can take either from the 1 week up to 8 weeks to be able to really safely be able to get your roads, your power system back up, get your grid back up, and then be able to have people in safe temporary housing before they could even mentally or physically decide on how to recover for the rest of their homes. We in Houston created a collaborative that worked together to partner and to create a system for the one application. If you can imagine a family not knowing where to go, how to get their home repaired, they're going to call all these organizations asking for help. All of us had a separate application program. We asked you to fill out the same form. In Houston, we created one portal where they could put their information in one time, and then that we would collect the information in all the organizations in Houston. We share that information. For Habitat Houston, it really benefited us. Our strength is the third phase, which is repair and rebuild. We are not the caseworker experts. We are really what we do day to day, which is to help repair and rebuild structures that we actually in our day job are building new and repairing. So it's really our sweet spot of what we do. We partner with other organizations that can help us do the other things that families need. Clothing, food. That's not what we do. What we have learned best in Houston is to, I say, stay in our lane, which is to be compassionate and understanding and to help families learn more about what the rebuild or repair process is. So we have taken our time to communicate to families that, yes, we've got a process. We will be here because we're your neighbor. We're part of the community. We were helping you as your neighbor. But when it's time to repair and rebuild, Houston Habitat leads in our city and gives examples to others so that we can all be able to repair and rebuild to the best of our ability. Now, I'm so sorry. The most important part about that is the collaborative part. So I wanted to give a shout out to our affiliate partners that we use a hub and spoke model in the Gulf Coast where we are helping, if it's a Habitat Houston that has the disaster Houston, Greater Houston, our affiliate partners in Louisiana and Florida support us and vice versa. Because we all know, again, it's not if we'll ever have a disaster, it's when we have a disaster. So our responses are broad and but local in nature.
Thanks so much, Allison. One point that's so important you made is as you look at those different phases, and for those of you listening in, one of the things we see over and over again is that most of the press attention goes to that initial first phase, the disaster, the life-saving and immediate phase. Then the press goes away, and about 80% of all the funding goes to that initial relief effort. But then the recovery, the actual rebuilding, it often is measured in years, not in months. And very often there's too little funding for that. So we really encourage donors to think about absolutely support that upfront relief effort, but then also think about the long-term rebuilding and recovery after the cameras are gone. Allison, there are kind of three big themes that you've raised: construction, insurance, and advocacy. And I want to unpack each of those. First, with construction, how are you adapting to the realities of a changing climate and more disasters as you think about how you build the homes?
Yeah, so it's like Jonathan, it's like you have to think of a gift, right? So at each of these disasters or these repeat events makes us stronger because we know we never want to muck and gut a house. We'd love for the house that as we get repaired, that the family stays stronger because they have a fortified roof. So for us, we see ourselves as building experts, and we're very vocal about building better new homes and repairing homes. So as we are continuing to not be in the disaster mode, we're always thinking in the back of our head how to make our homes more resilient, more adaptable to the climate. And as home builders, hardworking families, we want to change our shift from a shelter to more of our homes being built, not for today's conditions, but let's think ahead. Let's think ahead and use the materials and the construction technology, which, by the way, comes from our collaborative partners around the world to help us build and make our disasters, while they're still going to come, we're going to be the group that is able to fortify our homes, less repair. In the middle of my mind, I always think we repaired over 800 homes for Hurricane Harvey. For me, I want those families to have children that, while that was a traumatic experience, they are more resilient so that they don't have to have that trauma again. One of the ideas that we have, Jonathan, in building standards, I believe as a builder, we owe it to our community to share the knowledge that we have. In Houston Habitat volunteered to be on the City of Houston Building Code Committee for 2023. We were able to use the data and the expertise that we got from actually repairing homes to communicate to our city what we needed to do to make all houses, not just Habitat homes, but the community stronger and more resilient. One of the ideas that I found fascinating was elevation. Prior to our 2023 conversations, the building code in the city required your house to be 12 inches above the manhole cover in the middle of the street. That was it. And after that, our new construction on all residential will be elevated 2 feet above the 500-foot elevation. I know that sounds complicated, but when you have floods repeated, you start to create a history of it. And we use the data that comes from all the storms on the Gulf Coast to analyze to see if we'll have a 100-year storm or a 500-year storm. And in the Houston area, we've had the 100 storm 3 times. So they're just a benchmark. It's just a title. I wanted to let you know also, we talked about Robbins Landing for a minute. Robbins Landing was built in an area that had the most rain. It was not in a flood 100 or a 500-year flood area. It was just an area that happened to get 55 inches of rain. And so when we came back to build our development after Harvey, we committed to our families that we would be 2 feet above the elevation. But in Robbins Landing, we are 2 feet above that because we saw where you got to think of the long term. We are here for the long haul. We put long and long-term recovery because we want these homes to be resilient and these families to be successful. So now pier and beam is becoming more acceptable in the city of Houston. It used to be concrete slab on grade, but we're using helical piers and innovative ways to get our piers up. We're adding stronger moisture barriers, which are usually closer to the water. Now the city of Houston has added those as well. And even we have detention ponds, which are just a big retaining pool for water. Before Hurricane Harvey, we had a retention pond that was 10 acres and it was 15 feet deep. Because of the water that we had and the proximity it was to a bayou, we expanded our detention pond to it's 20 acres and it's 25 feet deep. Because what we know is our families, they're paying their mortgages for a long, long time. We don't want them to flood again. And then one other fun fact, and this is not about hurricanes or heat, but we have, our city did not require a product for freezes called PEX pipe, P-E-X, PEX pipe. It's a flexible pipe. We were able then to advocate for that in our building code as well. So all residential homes in the city of Houston will not be installed with traditional PVC pipe, but with PEX pipe. We consider that a win because frozen pipes are just as bad when your pipes break in your house. Some of the ideas we've done.
That's great, Allison. Thank you so much for some great specific examples. And I think we've seen something I'm really proud of is 20 years ago, Habitat was a pioneer in bringing energy efficient construction to low-income families when that was a luxury product because they needed the affordability. In the same way, we've been out in front on building resilient homes because, again, our families have the least cushion to be able to withstand the shocks, and we want to help them. Something Allison mentioned that's been a big deal is fortified homes, and Habitat started quite a long time ago investing, and it's not a huge premium to make a house much safer. And some of you may remember when Mexico Beach got hit by a big hurricane a number of years ago, the whole community was destroyed, and there were these 5 homes sitting kind of untouched in the middle of all the destruction. And they turned out to be Habitat homes. And the difference was about $2,000 worth of strapping and connectors to make sure that the roof was anchored into the foundation of the home. And that made all the difference in terms of the survivability of those. We're going to come back to both our panelists now, and we'll start with you, Hema. But as you think about what are the most significant challenges or barriers that you're facing in addressing climate resilient housing strategies?
Thank you so much for the question. I believe that one of the most significant challenges we currently face when addressing climate resilient housing strategies is understanding that it's not just a technical issue, it's a systemic one. First, there is a gap in knowledge and awareness among families, many actors in the ecosystems. And for example, families may want to build better, but if they don't always have access to the right information, they perceive climate risk as a priority compared to other immediate needs, those investments will not be made. Second, as I mentioned before, we face severe structural financial barriers. Many low-income families do not qualify for adequate financial products, and the available offerings are not adapted of how families are currently building, which is progressively. This limits access to the resources that are needed at the time for having built these resilient or investing resilient home improvements. And then, of course, there is this market fragmentation, and that's how we want to work with small and medium enterprises in the construction sectors, and also integrate foremen, small hardware stores, and suppliers that are not always aligned with how consistently these technical capacity or incentives are there to promote resilient practices for home building. And finally, I have to say the last critical thing that I also mentioned before, this lack of solid and rigorous data that can give evidence about the real impact of resilient interventions on how these interventions can change the life of millions of people in Latin America, for example. We need to have more and better data to persuade decision makers, design more effective public policies, and of course, scale up innovative solutions that are still that are out there, but the fragmentation, families do not understand how to reach for those type of solutions. So in summary, challenges, of course, are multiple, but our product was about technical, financial, social, and market dimensions. And that's why we say this is a systemic approach. And what we need to do is bringing together all actors to move this forward sustainably. I have to say that the work that we have done in Peru has impacted the life of around more than 26,000 people to date. And that's something we are very proud of.
No, it's huge. And I think such an important point about that we have to think systemically about all the pieces, because if we have unconnected interventions, we may not get the impact we're really trying to have. Allison, how about for you? What are the ways you think about challenges and barriers?
So for us, the challenge, I think, is, again, communication. For others is to be able to tell our story. We do see that when disasters hit, the attention goes to those stories, but in 3 days, the stories have moved on. So for us to get financial support and for us to be able to tell the story correctly, we want to be able to keep communicating the importance and the resiliency and the outcomes that we have to our donors and to our partners and to the government, so that we can advocate for investment into long-term repair and recovery as well.
No, it's a great point. It ties to your earlier point about insurance. We've got actually this great record on building fortified homes that hasn't always translated into lower insurance premiums. And we need to Hema's point, take that data, and that should translate into lower costs for our homeowners because, in fact, they are in safer homes that are that have less risk to the insurer. Next question also for both of you, we are seeing feels like a nonstop series of disasters. They're coming fast and furious. What lessons from past recoveries can be applied to future disasters? Hema, maybe to you.
I kind of I feel so honored about this call and to connect with Alison, because what Habitat for Humanity's role has always been not about rebuilding quickly, but rebuilding better. And we need to think of disasters and urgencies, not just to think about temporary solutions. As these events become more general or more frequent, then we simply cannot replicate the same vulnerabilities. And we have to be super aware about that. We have to understand how we think about resilience and how we think that within a broader ecosystems, how materials, construction techniques, site locations, if those variables are not incorporated, communities will just remain as exposed or even more so to the next event. So there is, I think we need to rethink the way we are engaging with the whole ecosystem and an influence agenda that puts Habitat for Humanity at the center of conversations of not just rebuilding, but how to think sustainability at the core of everything that we do. So we just not aim to return on starting point, but brainstorm of vulnerabilities into long-term resilience for families.
And Alison, same question to you.
So the lessons that we've learned, actually, we don't learn them just all in Houston. We learn them all over our Habitat network. The best, disasters really bring out the best in people, and they are the most trustworthy. I mean, so when we've had some disasters from other places, we learn from what they do. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We listen, we learn, and our affiliates and our partners around the globe have been really, really good with that. We also, our best practice too is that we live in our communities. We know our neighbors, and so we have developed that trust factor all over, so that when the storm comes, we're able then to rally the troops, let the front line do what they do, and then let Habitat come back and rebuild. But Jonathan, the best part, I mean, if you're going to make lemonade out of lemons, when you look at disaster and disaster resiliency, Habitat across the United States, but also across the world, they are innovative. They're always doing better. We share our results, the good and the bad, and we make it stronger, so that when our next community, because we're a global community, we're able then to take that data, look at it, rework it. I'm so proud of the way that Habitat International has responded to disasters, especially the ones that are getting more complex around the world, because when we do that, we're all able to learn and then bring it back home to our community, our neighbors, our hardworking families, to make our community stronger.
Oh, thank you. It's such an important point. And it's, I think some of the saddest parts of my work have been visiting the aftermath of these crises. When I started, we were responding to the Indian Ocean tsunami and then Hurricane Katrina, two massive housing disasters. But they keep on coming, and it's so critical that we learn from that. Final question, and then we will wrap up. How can donors and partners best support your work now and in the coming months and years? So, Alison, we'll start with you.
For me, that's about partnership again, right? Our donors and our partners, they live in the communities that we serve. They know the value of what we bring, so I'd like to kind of rally, let's all get together, because our hardworking families, our partners, and our donors, we need to be talking to them all year round. it's called blue sky, but the opposite of blue sky is what we all need to be prepared for. So keeping our communication loop with our donors and partners, and for them to listen and learn and to share when they have a great idea, because it's not that one result. We're here for forever. We're the organization that will be in that community when Hurricane Harvey hit, when Hurricane Katrina hit, all of them, we're all there together. So for our partners and our collaborators, to me, I say welcome, because we can all help all these families together.
Thank you for that. Hema.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I believe that donors and partners can best support us now and in the future, but by helping to scale our impact in a sustainable way. And that means that first, we need long-term funding, not just one-off, for developing these strategic partnerships that will allow us to plan with vision and co-create solutions that evolve together in these constant facing challenges that are shifting all the time, whether if it's market change, climate change, market dynamics, and the evolving needs of families. Second, I think they can help us tremendously by supporting the amplification of our learnings. And that means backing our interventions and helping us to document, systematize, and share what works. And third, we see a huge opportunity in working together to mobilize local resources and actors. Real change will happen if we strengthen local capacities, and that means having all of those actors that at the end of the day that are building the communities in a more sustainable way.
Thank you to both of you. I am sad this time has gone fast, and unfortunately that is all the time we have for our panel. Just want to make a comment before closing out. And this struck me after Hurricane Harvey. Our beloved volunteer, President Carter, wrote an op-ed after Harvey, and he quoted Lincoln, but he said, when the water rises, so do our better angels. And you see neighbor helping neighbor, you see people coming across. And he said that, when someone comes to help you, you don't care if they're from a different race, a different religion, a different background. You're just glad they're there to help. And then he asked the really hard question, which is, why can't we act like that every day when there's not a disaster, which we should keep in mind. But the reality is these disasters are happening, and we have to be prepared to make sure that we are building resilient families in resilient communities to be ready for that. Thank you, Allison and Hema, for sharing your firsthand experiences, insights, and the realities your communities are facing due to climate disasters. And thank you all for being a part of this Cornerstone conversation. Your time, your attention, and most importantly, your willingness to act means the world to families affected by disasters. So thank you for being some of those better angels. Our work is only possible with your continued support. And now, during a time of uncertainty for so many, the need for Habitat's work is greater than ever. As a result, we're asking all our donors to renew or upgrade their support to ensure we can help as many families and individuals as possible. Together, we build not only resilient homes, but also resilient homeowners. We'd also love to get your feedback on this call to ensure that we're offering you meaningful and engaging experiences. This is the first of what I hope will be many more of these calls, connecting you with leaders throughout the Habitat Network and giving you an opportunity to learn more about the work that you so generously support. Please scan the QR code on the screen with your cell phone to complete a brief survey. We'll leave that up on the screen for a few minutes if you need to get your phone. Thank you all for your continued support and your commitment to helping us build a world where everyone has a safe and decent place to call home.